Hi, my name is Anil Lewis. I'm the Executive Director of Blindness Initiatives for the National Federation of the Blind, the most transformative membership organization of blind Americans. The unemployment rate of blind Americans has hovered around 70% for decades. The root remains the fears and misconceptions that people have around the capacity of blind people and the lack of knowledge around the tools that blind people use to be competitive every day. Through this series, we hope to educate both blind job seekers and employers about the variety of different careers that blind people are actively pursuing today and the tools and strategies they use to be competitive on the job. We're hoping that this will help put a dent in the unemployment rate and create greater opportunities for blind people. So let's take a look at where the blind work. Today, we'll be listening to stories from individuals that are currently employed as government contractors.
I'm Tracy Franco. In addition to my roles in the National Federation of the Blind, I work at the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation. It's a U.S. government small agency responsible for guaranteeing private pension plans. So I'm going to take a few minutes to provide some context because in government, we love special terms and sometimes some acronyms. We're going to try to avoid doing that, but I'm going to provide some context about government contracting in less than 5 minutes. And then we'll start off with our great team of individuals who are, I would like to say, are ninjas of government contracting. So the government buys a tremendous amount of products and services, and the government uses those to deliver to you and I as citizens of our country. Contractors actually do much of the work of government, and many of your touch points with your government, whether you work interacting with federal agencies or state governments, are actually interacting with the contractors who are involved in helping the government be successful and achieving its goals. And these contracts with these agencies are truly a big part of how we fulfill our mission to serve the American citizens. There's a lot of rules because the government buys all kinds of stuff. As part of us purchasing, there are a set of very specific rules, roles and responsibilities, and expectations in government contracting to make sure things are a fair playing field. Now, when I say fair playing field, it means everyone understands the rules, but it does not necessarily mean equal because as part of government, we have specific goals to achieve, such as supporting small businesses and achieving specific socioeconomic roles. There are lots of rules and requirements to make the government purchasing work, and there's a set of key roles in that process. So first of all, I want to talk about the people who are the buyers. This is a community of individuals who are contracting specialists and contracting officers who both commit the government to making purchases and know all those detailed rules. Some might even call them maybe even bureaucratic rules to make sure we're following a consistent process. Our contracting officers are individuals who actually make the decision, yes, we will commit the government to this contract to work with a specific contractor to achieve a specific result. Our contracting specialists are truly those ninjas who know all of the rules and support the contracting specialists and everyone in that contracting process to ensure that we are following a valid process that works effective and well. So in addition, there are our customers. The customers are the individuals who want to get something done, who work for the government. And those individuals who work for the government are, as the customers, they want some product or service to help achieve that particular agency or office's goal to be achieved. As part of that process, they appoint someone to be their spokesperson for the customer. Those individuals are called the contracting officer's representative. That's actually what I do. And as a result, contracting officer's representative might define what the expectations are for the customer, might have the interaction with the contractor, and are the sort of that point person working between the contractor and the government to make sure the government's expectations are met, defining what those rules are, paying invoices, and making sure that we get what we want. And then there are our contractors. Contractors are part of the contracting community because they're actually proposing to do the work and delivering that work. So as part of that process, while a contracting officer's representative might define a performance work statement or what do they want to buy, which gets turned by the contracting specialists into a solicitation, the contractors will submit proposals to respond to that and say, I can do this work in this way for this price. All of that happens oftentimes in marketplaces, almost like a mall where that you'll hear the word schedule being referred to, because sometimes there are actually defined processes or places where, as part of a schedule, a set of terms and conditions are predefined between contractors and the government so that we make an easy marketplace, almost like a shopping mall. So we've talked about a variety of basic terms in our government contracting process. Now we're going to bring to you a set of individuals who are those contracting specialists. To facilitate that conversation, we have a longtime leader in the NFB of Virginia, Rodney Neely, who's going to facilitate these discussions. And he is also has a long background in government contracting. Here's Rodney.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rodney Neely, and I have recently retired from the federal government. I worked in contracting for about 20 years. I spent most of my career at the United States Environmental Protection Agency. I started out as a contract specialist, and then eventually I moved to being a procurement analyst and doing a lot of training on policies and procedures and writing policies and procedures for purchasing items. And so for purchasing and governing the way we purchase at the EPA. Now, to answer Sandra Fortier's question that I saw in chat, yes, Sandra, the government will buy you specialized equipment if you need it for a reasonable accommodation in most cases. Now, what I'm going to do right now, we have 3 wonderful participants that are active contract specialists right now. I am retired. I retired in December, so I am no longer an active contract specialist or a procurement analyst. But we do have 3 people who are contract specialists. And what I'm going to start out with, I'm going to ask them a few questions, and we're going to have a little discussion. And then you guys are going to have an opportunity to ask some questions. So we'll start out. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, including your name, your professional title, and what your typical workday looks like? And what are some of the main duties and responsibilities that you have, during your regular day?
Okay, I guess I will get this started. I'm Sandra Sermons, and I have been a contract specialist for a good many years. My official title is Senior Contract Specialist. I also have the credential of a Certified Professional of Contract Management, so CPCM. And for me, a typical day is administering contracts. Let's say the contractor would like to make a change. They submit what's called a modification. So I have to evaluate the modification, determine whether or not it's in our best interest to approve it, execute it, or no. Also, I'm usually evaluating, as it stands now, I'm in the middle of evaluating 2 proposals. I administer 70 contracts, so they are in any number of phases of modifications, options, and all sorts of things. And then I also interact with my colleagues and other government personnel. Sometimes contractors have questions. Sometimes other agencies have questions. Sometimes I have to do trainings. Sometimes I have to sit in on meetings. So it's never a dull moment. And I never quite know at the beginning of the day what is going to transpire. So I sort of go by the motto, expect the unexpected. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Laura McLean. I work as a contract specialist for the General Services Administration. I have been there for about 3.5 years. My typical day is administering contracts, be it receiving an offer from a contractor, evaluating the offer for financial, technical, administrative parameters, or also doing modifications or options if the need presents it. It just requires a lot of evaluation for the multiple award schedule, which is what I perform under, and make sure that all the policies are adhered to and that the packages that are received have everything per the requirements of the mass solicitation, which is the roadmap for putting somebody on the multiple award schedule or the federal supply schedule. So that's what I do. I have been there for about 3.5 years, and it's been a good experience so far. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Michael Davis, and I have worked for the Navy, the Coast Guard, and I currently work for the Air Force. We're in contracting for 13 years. I've worked for a Navy admiral when I was at Navy Medicine East. I now work with a lot of Air Force commanders and Air Force customers, and they have a lot of different needs. A lot of the contracts that we buy are for cybersecurity services. So mostly a typical day right now is figuring out what type of services our customers need within the cybersecurity sector. And that could range from, determining how much it would cost to hire different employees. We don't actually hire the employees. We evaluate proposals from companies and determine if they're fair and reasonable in terms of the hiring of the employee. We make sure that the employee has the right skill set for the job in accordance with the performance work statement provided by the customer. We'll ask the customer questions like, does this proposal look reasonable based on what you're telling us that you need? Will these employees provide the service that you need? Does this company sound like a good fit for the organization? It's a lot of just evaluating proposals. I have contracts in various phases, various option phases. Usually it's a contract that has a base year and 4 option years, so the customer can continue to have services. We just try to make sure that the customer gets the services that they need from the companies. And we can receive any number of questions from CEOs of companies or Air Force customers or accounting questions. It's just could be any number of questions. But like Sandra said, I don't know what will happen from each hour to each hour, because the day just varies as it goes along. So we just expect the unexpected and we just go with it.
Well, great. Just to kind of demystify one of the terms Michael used, a performance work statement is like the description of the type of work that needs to be done for a specific contract. It just outlines the objectives that the government has and that they want the company to satisfy or to meet in order for their proposal to be accepted and for them to be able to work successfully on the contract. And I know that wasn't intentional, but that was one of those terms of art that was used pretty frequently. What you might have heard before is a statement of work. The difference between the two is that performance work statement describes things in terms of the outcomes that we want to achieve in the government rather than the methodology that the contractor has to use to achieve certain goals. Okay, now the next question. What is some of your educational or life experience that helped you to prepare for your current position?
My background is I have a bachelor's degree in management information systems and a pretty extensive small business background. I came to this position through the National Industries for the Blind's contract closeout positions. I was located on 3 different contracts as a contract closeout specialist for about 5.5 years, and it prepared me and it gave me access to a lot of education, which I took full advantage of in order to almost receive my FACC Level 1, which is a requirement in our industry when you become a contract specialist. But I wanted a little bit more. I wanted a career a little bit past a contract closeout specialist. So I looked into the National Contract Management Association's certifications, and I received my CFCM, which is a Certified Federal Contract Manager certification right before I started applying, and it helped give me a good education, a good, well-rounded education before I started applying for contract specialist positions. And I took the prep course for it. So it gave me some knowledge that I didn't have. And my best advice was to take as much of free education, if you have access to it, that you can, and to try and get involved. And so that was how I came to this. My small business background, along with a lot of other things, especially my contract closeout specialist, gave me a good springboard in order to apply for this position. Like I said, I've been here for 3 years, and education just continues when you get into the position as well.
So for me, I came into federal procurement by way of the government-wide acquisition management intern program, of which Rodney is also a proud alumni. They gave us all of the coursework that we would need in order to obtain our FACSI level 1. So that was huge. And like Laura, I just continually sought additional education, because education is key, it's power, and our industry is constantly changing because our services are changing, our customers are changing, therefore the education changes. So I decided that it would be in my best interest to sit for the CPCM, which is Certified Professional Contract Management. That is the highest certification that NCMA offers. I just felt like it would make me more marketable on whatever team I chose to play on. And basically, that's kind of the education and my philosophy that I use throughout, that I've always used throughout my career. Thanks.
My background is in computer science and accounting, because I got my degree in accounting from the University of Richmond in undergrad. But in undergrad, I also took a lot of computer science and math classes. And so I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do until I found out about the career field of contract specialist, which sounded really interesting. There was a program that the National Institute for the Blind had that they allowed people to sign up and take classes to get certified in contracting. And through that program, I got my level 2 certification. And after I got my certification, I started to apply for jobs. And when they realized that I was already certified, they were very happy about that. And that really did help me to learn more about the field and to get into it. And because I have a math background, this is a problem-solving type of career field, at least in my mind, because, from one day to the next, you don't know what you'll be doing. So you have to be able to be flexible and to learn new things and to solve problems in general. I also have an MBA, and I got that last year from William and Mary. My concentration was in data analytics. And in fact, when I interviewed for the job that I have now in 2018, when they found out I had a computer science background, that's why they put me in the cyber division, because knowing what you're buying is a big part of being successful, whatever you're trying to buy. And just this specific thing, having a background in computer science, it's been beneficial.
Okay. Can you guys describe some of the attitudinal barriers that you might have encountered during your contracting career?
Okay. So some of the attitudinal barriers that I've encountered, I would say that there has been some question in terms of my abilities, what I can or cannot do. And to me, ideally, I would like to be given the same opportunities as everyone else. I would like to start from the same point as everyone else, but I realize that that is not going to happen probably in my lifetime. So I sort of figured that the best approach to disproving negativity or whatever is to simply do the work and do the work well to the best of my ability. What I did was to find a niche. So I did the work nobody else wanted to do. I did it well and I did it quickly. And when my productivity, time and time again, continued to be the second highest in the branch, it sort of dispelled all of the, well, how can she? Because she did, you know?
Excellent answer. Does anyone else want to respond to that question?
I agree with Sandra as well, because at least when I started out, there were a lot of questions about, will he be able to do this job? What will we have to provide? But I was fortunate in that I found an office that was supportive and were willing to provide the equipment that I've carried with me throughout my career. I have a very large screen that I use. I have a CCTV that the government provided. I have different equipment that they've provided, magnification devices. And those devices have stayed with me and helped me to have the accommodations that I need to do my job. But for a long time before I found that office, it was a lot of, well, how can he do this? But when I got into my first real office that actually supported me, my productivity was extremely high. So that pretty much dispelled anything from that point on. And I just kind of maintained that throughout my career. That way, no one can say, oh, he won't be able to do this or whatever.
Great response, Michael.
I had the opportunity to start my position as a contract specialist about 2 weeks before the pandemic ensued. So when I first came to my position, they had somebody who retired who actually was low vision. When I came in, they asked me what I needed. I wasn't quite sure what I needed. I said, yes, I will take the person who just retired stuff. Just make it easy. And for the first 2 weeks, it was fine. I didn't have a lot of people ask. I didn't have a lot of comments, but I was so new. When they told us to go home and telework, though, it was a little different. You get on a Zoom call and they're like, oh, just go up to the right corner where it says, I didn't follow that as well. And under some of my supervisors, I had to kind of speak up because you don't always, when you're low vision, they can't tell unless somebody physically tells them. And so going through as a contract specialist, relatively new, nobody knew me. You had to actually reach out and call somebody literally on Google or Google Meet. So I had to communicate by calling somebody and saying, for example, I can't see what your corrections are. Can we do it a different way? I'm not trying to, glaze over this. I just didn't see them, or I didn't see how you were making your corrections instead of a little line that I don't pick up or something like that. So, a lot for me, at least in this position, was trying to make the adjustment with the people I directly worked with and letting them know what I could see and what I couldn't see and how to get around what I couldn't see in a different way. So communication was key. We had hiccups, but it always helped to speak it out. And I haven't really had big hiccups. The only time I would have something that would happen and they'd say, you go over here and look at this. And I'm like, can you just tell me what going over where and look at what is? So, the communication was key. I had a relatively easy transfer just because I had my home set up. Once I got that done, I was pretty good. I just had to tell some people in case they wondered why something wasn't reviewed correctly. That's about it. I've had a pretty good transition and, people are willing to work with you, at least when you're talking with them. So communication for me was key.
Well, thank you, Laura. The next question that I have for you is, what sorts of techniques and strategies do you use to do your job? Do you use Braille, screen reading technology, like JAWS or Zoom Text, or do you use a larger monitor to enable you to read the information on your computer screen?
Okay, so for me, I am a huge Braille proponent. I don't know, I have no idea how I would be able to do my job without Braille. I have had a series of Braille note takers that, change depending on, because there are always different ones. So I also use JAWS, and I have a reader. Back when I first started, we had mountains, and I do mean mountains of paper. I mean, files were taller than me, and I'm 5'10". So I started out with readers, and fortunately, my office was amenable to hiring readers for me. One of my supervisors' father was a reader in college, and so they were perfectly okay with hiring a reader for me. And GSA has been extraordinary with respect to hiring readers. And so even though we now don't have paper, there are still some systemic issues that require me to utilize a reader if I want to maximize my efficiency. Thanks.
Now, I'm going to let Michael and Laura answer, but before they do, I do want to say something for those of you who might have some experience with some of the systems in the federal government. Some of the systems in government are not exactly user-friendly for those of us who use screen readers, and some of them are not even friendly for people who use screen enlargement programs like Zoom Text. And sometimes, although the government is supposed to purchase things that are information communication technology that is federally compliant, we all know that they haven't done a great job of that right now. But that is getting a little better, but it's a much slower process than we would like for this to happen. So there are definitely some challenges for those of us who have to use certain types of equipment and certain programs that are adopted by the federal government. And this is particularly true of people who use JAWS for Windows, because some things just don't have keyboard commands. The two other areas where we have some problems are that the government doesn't always provide very much training on how to use whatever program they might have adopted this year using a screen reader. So it's up to us to kind of get that training ourselves, or if we can't do it ourselves, sometimes we'll have to request it from our bosses, and that takes a while, and that can really slow you down. It's also a bureaucratic nightmare sometimes. Another area where we have had trouble, and this is true both in government and outside of government, is some of the e-learning systems are not the best. Some of the e-learning systems don't work as well with their screen readers and with screen enlargement programs as maybe we would like. And this is going to be a big, interesting situation because of some of the changes to the way people are being instructed. Before, like when Sandra and I were first entering the government, we had a lot of instructor-led classes. They were in-person classes. For people that are entering the government now, they're doing things more on the internet and more by web. And as someone who worked in training and who did a lot of stuff with training, a lot of the platforms that we used for some of the group-related trainings were not totally accessible. So I want to kind of get that out of the way. I don't want to go into too much detail about that, because every situation is different. But I did want to at least, kind of address the elephant in the room that a lot of people have problems with. And so Michael or Laura, go ahead and answer the last question. I just wanted to do that right after Sandra did her question, because her response was because I'm totally blind too. And I did not have a reader when I was working. But I did for a while, but there were some problems, and I chose not to have one any longer. But it was a little difficult sometimes because of some of the equipment that the government chose to purchase, or some of the programs that the government chose to purchase. Sometimes I was the one who had to complain about them not being kind of Section 508 conformant. So go ahead, Michael or Laura, go ahead and answer your portion of the question.
Well, I kind of alluded to it, but I really use a very large monitor. And when I started, we did have mountains and mountains and mountains of paper. So I used my CCTV a lot. But now I just use magnification software because we've kind of moved to a more virtual environment, internet-based environment. So I just enlarge everything to make sure that it's large enough. So I just use the enlargement software. And sometimes I highlight things. If I am looking for particular words or trying to change things, or am reviewing a document and I'm changing a document, I'll highlight areas that need to be changed and then, change the areas.
I have used a lot of different things over the years. I did used to use Zoom text. I even had it on my current computer up until they changed it. But Zoom text takes way too much RAM, slows everything down. So the next thing that I used is the accessibility function, and that has just over the last couple of years become more user-friendly. And I also have a larger monitor. So when I do use accessibility for Windows, you go all over the place. And I try and highlight things as well. My contracting officer in reviews of my work has learned to highlight an area just so I don't miss it. I do have a CCT, but I do not use it because we are all virtual now. And to be honest, I use my phone if I can't see something to enlarge it, sometimes have to in regard to other things. So, with virtual items, I've tried different things. More recently, there are some programs that will allow you to read a document aloud in the Microsoft Suite, not Excel, but Word. And I will use that if I have to, or Adobe. I guess it's Adobe that allows that. But I will read through a document just to make sure, just because it's a lot of reading by the time you get to page 27, I would rather listen to it. Sometimes it helps you go through the document to make sure you haven't missed anything. So right now it's accessibilities through Windows and highlighting and a little bit of reading. I think you got to use what works for you well.
Great, Laura. Now, would anyone like to add any concluding remarks about your jobs that you'd like to tell us that you haven't gotten a chance to say during this presentation?
Yes, just a couple things. One is federal procurement is a wonderful field. For me, it is not just a job. It's a career. It's a lifelong event. And I guess because there is so much reading, I like to read. I like policies. I like the idea that in some small way, maybe I can help some taxpayer. Maybe I can help, even doing seminars like these, interest somebody else who's blind in potentially pursuing this type of career, because I deliberately chose it, but I made a good choice. And I truly hope that through the seminar, other folks will sort of get that spark and look into federal procurement, because it's a very rewarding career. And one thing about it, it's one of the more highly demanded series. Like, we have never been able to participate in a buyout. I mean, never. So, if you're looking for job security, this is among the most secure that you can find. Thanks.
I agree with that for sure. It's been a great career field. I've enjoyed the different opportunities that are within this career field, because it's not just contracting, it's cost and price analysis, it's policies, it's procedures, there's a lot of different facets to it. You could almost do anything with it. It just has a lot of opportunity and a lot of ways you can grow and develop, and you can just hone in on what your skill set is and what you like to do. And I hope that this does generate interest in the career field in general.
If you like change, if you're not afraid of learning something new, the government can provide, or the 1102 field can provide a challenge, but it's kind of welcome. They give you a lot of support into what you're trying to learn, trying to keep up on the ever-changing field, because policy and procedures are always changing. I like it because I don't feel like I don't feel like I'm stuck. I feel like that I have options that I can try and reach out a different way or specialize in a different segment or area. My workplace gives me options of how to do things differently, or they give me options on where I might go. I feel like I have a future. I have a career, not just a job. They expect high expectations, but so do I. And part of exploring or keeping present or keeping up to date is this changing workforce. I like that. I don't like to be stable or stale. I like the change. So if you're comfortable with that, and sometimes change is uncomfortable, but if you're comfortable with that, if you like policy, you can go policy. If you like data, you can go data. There's lots of different ways to go. The government gives you a lot of opportunities. You feel like you have an advantage to be able to move around if you keep up on things. I enjoy a challenge, like I said, and for me, it was a good, stable choice, but at the same time, I'm not stuck. I have opportunity, and I feel very, very fortunate to be in this position, but you do have to prepare for it. If you're trying to do it, there's a lot of people out there applying for 1102s, but do something towards it. Do something that sets you out. Maybe if it's a certification or your education, if you're a contract closeout specialist with DAU, take as much as you can and make sure you note that. If you go to a National Contract Management Association meeting, make a note of that. I think it's a good opportunity.
Thank you all very much, panelists. I really appreciate all your comments, all your answers to our questions. Without you, this wouldn't have been a success. To explain how you get into the contracting field, I did do a handout on that, and I'm gonna send it to Maurice, and maybe he can send it out to everyone who registered for the conference. But I'm gonna go ahead and go over a few things here, but not everything. What you have to do is you have to apply through usajobs.opm.gov, and you want to look for things, usually an 1102 for a contract specialist or 1105 for a purchasing agent. 1102 is mainly what you would want because they have better grades, they have higher grades. In order to be considered for an 1102, though, you have to have 24 hours of business credit, from an accredited university. And also, it's easier and looks better if you have a degree in business. I'll be honest about that. That's another thing. They won't say that, but that's something else that looks better. Another thing that would help you is if you can get some sort of certification from NCMA. If you don't have that business degree, another way to get in is through NIB's contract closeout program. They don't have as strict education requirements. They start off at about the same salary, but there is some potential for progression, but it's not as automatic as it is for federal employees. So that's the main part of it. There's a lot more to that question that I don't feel qualified to answer right now. I mean, I do have some information about it in the handout I produced, but I can't exactly explain the entire answer to that whole question because there's a lot more to it than I can address right now.
First of all, thanks for presenting, everyone. Has anyone used a Braille display at their job, or do you have a Braille embosser to do any of your reading? I think some of you are totally blind Braille users. That's one of my questions. And have all the databases been accessible to you? I'm assuming that as a government specialist, you all were provided JAWS as a reasonable accommodation or some other screen reader to do your job. So I know that reading has been touched on, but yeah, I was just curious about Braille. And is that one of your ways of handling reading on the job or what? So thank you.
I have used a Braille display. I used it almost every day when I was at work. I used it a lot during training. When the CAT program was in existence, it was really easy to get assistive technology for a lot of federal agencies. It wasn't a problem. But once the CAT program closed down in 2018, 2020 or something like that, it became a bit harder for us to get technology sometimes. I mean, you could still get it, but it took a lot longer. Now, the other thing is that a lot of the databases are not accessible, Ashley. That's just the truth. And sometimes you have to get help. Maybe you have a reader. Maybe every once in a while you have to use something called IRA to access the database. Now, that's not a real popular way to do it. We're really probably not supposed to do that, but sometimes you have to do what you have to do. IRA is a service that enables people to, you call the person on using your iPhone, and they can't get inside your computer because there are a lot of security issues. But sometimes if you're doing a document or something, I've had to put it on my personal computer, and my boss didn't really like it, but like when I would produce things with using an IRA reader, they always came out formatted better. So a lot of times, she'd kind of look the other way. It is a very unfortunate situation that not everything is accessible, but that shouldn't be a surprise considering that about 97% of websites are not totally accessible for blind people. So I've answered the question to the best of my ability.
Okay, great. Thanks for this presentation. I had a quick question. I think it was Sandra who mentioned a program she was involved with that prepared her for this field of work, an internship program. Can she tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So it was called the Government-Wide Acquisition Management Intern Program. It was a 2-year program where a bunch of different government agencies collaborated. And so there were 12 of us, and we had 4 6-month rotations. And at the end of those 2 years, assuming that you finished the program, you were guaranteed placement at one of your rotation sites. My rotation sites were the Department of the Interior, Health and Human Services, the Coast Guard, and GSA. All 4 of my rotation sites wanted me to come back. I wanted to stay at GSA, and GSA wanted me to stay. So that's where I landed. But that was a fabulous program. There are tons of agency-wide acquisition programs, but they don't give you a flavor of an entirely different agency. And so at the end of that program, I knew a whole lot about several entirely different government agencies. And that gave me a better perspective when it came time to selecting where I wanted to land permanently.
But that program doesn't exist anymore. Now they have a pathways program, and I don't know as much about that. I know that the government acquisition intern program doesn't exist anymore. They closed it down, but they do have pathways programs, and I don't know about any new programs like the government-wide acquisition intern program. I was also a member of that program, but Sandra paved the way for me. So
yep, I was in the inaugural class. Rodney was 2 classes behind me?
Yes, I was 2 classes behind you. And basically, though, unfortunately, there isn't a program like that in the government right now for contract specialists.
Follow-up question was, speaking of accessibility, in my internships, which were somewhat government related, some of them were, there was a problem recording my hours worked, which is the time and attendance, and kind of like signing in and out, like NLS that one of them was at NLS, and somebody, it was paper us back then, although it's electronic now, they had to literally write my name in and the time for me, sign me in and out. But so my question is, how do you handle your time and attendance, especially now that some of this work is probably done remotely? So how do they know when you're at work? And do you all get the same federal benefits as everyone else is, in your jobs, like the same holidays and that sort of thing? Thanks.
Of course, Ashley. Everyone is a federal employee here, so of course we get the same benefits and everything as all of the other federal employees. If they didn't, that would be discrimination. One of the things you were asking about, I think, is what you were trying to ask about is, well, how accessible is the time and assistance, the time and attendance system, and some of the other administrative systems where you work or where you used to work in my case. In my case, I know a lot about the time and attendance system. where I used to work. I was the guinea pig. I was the person who they asked to test it. I had to train other blind people on it. Even when I left, it was not totally accessible, but they made it better than, a few years ago when, but the one thing that they always ended up making me do, which I really resented, was I would make a mistake on my time card and they wouldn't catch it. And then I'd have to go back and change it, but they'd make me change it even though it was their mistake because they didn't catch it in time. So then I'd have to go back and change it. And it just really was annoying, but that's just part of life. And you just have to live with it. But that is an area where I wish things were a little better. There are electronic time card systems. There are some other systems that are not totally accessible either, especially a lot of the contract writing systems are, although they are accessible, they're difficult to use with screen readers. So, there are some challenges in that area. So when you're working, they don't really care about how inaccessible something is. What they want to be able to do is that you need to be able to do the work that you're assigned to do. So you need to kind of work and try to figure out ways around some of the accessibility challenges. And every situation is individual. And so it's really hard for me to answer any specific questions about that.
So I'd like to help contribute to that conversation because there certainly are challenges with accessibility for government systems and in private industry. This is a true statement. The challenge is, how do you address those things by identifying ways to overcome those challenges, such as, for a variety of things. Like when I first started at my agency, I came up with opportunities to problem solve by getting help from my coworkers or interns or other people within the agency. But also want to recognize that one of the things we're working on within the Federation is to provide ways to, through our National Association of Blind Government Employees, one of our National Federation of the Blind divisions, we're actually building a community which we can ask questions and work to overcome challenges, because the challenges with some aspects of our jobs would be consistent across government agencies and across various aspects, whether it's the Department of Defense or civilian agencies or all kinds of other organizations. We share a lot of some of the same challenges and opportunities, and we're trying to build a community by which we can help each other out.
I encourage everyone who is remotely interested to take a closer look at the field, because it is a wonderful field. It's kind of lonely. There aren't that many of us floating around, and I truly want to do my part to increase the number of blind people that are employed as contracting professionals for the U.S. government. My email address is D as in Delta, S as in Sigma, T as in Theta, 71992 at Gmail. So DST71992 at Gmail.
This is Tracy. I would like to simply state that I am not a contracting specialist. I serve as a core. You can add a component of your job in government in contracting as a way to grow your influence within the organization. It can be a great way to build your career in government and distinguish yourself against your peers to get those opportunities for advancement and an opportunity to get insight into some of the key decision-making that happens within government agencies and accentuate your career.
National Federation of the Blind. Live the life you want.